Cartagena de Indias, a city that glitters in the Caribbean sun like a forgotten jewel from the colonial era. The colorful facades of the old town are reflected in the faces of tourists strolling through the narrow streets while street musicians play their cumbia rhythms. It is the perfect place for a wedding, the perfect place for a new beginning. Here, where history breathes in every wall and the sea promises endless freedom, Valentina Morales was to experience the happiest day of her life. She was 29 years old, a young woman with big dreams and a heart full of hope. Her dark eyes sparkled when she talked about her future, and her smile could brighten even the greyest days in Bogotá, where she had spent most of her life. Valentina worked as a graphic designer for a small advertising agency in the Colombian capital. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it fulfilled her. She loved playing with colors, developing concepts, bringing ideas to life. Her colleagues appreciated her creativity and her ability to remain calm even under pressure. But despite her professional success, Valentina often felt lonely. The men she had met in Bogotá were either too superficial or too busy with their own careers. She longed for someone who really saw her, who understood her dreams and wanted to start a family with her. Then, 8 months ago, she met him, Sebastian Hartmann, a German engineer working for an international company in Colombia. They met at a networking event for young professionals in Bogotá. Valentina was there to make contacts for her agency, Sebastian, to better understand the local business world. He immediately caught her eye. He was different from the other men in the room. Tall, blonde, with clear blue eyes and a smile that was both warm and reserved. It was this Northern European blend of politeness and distance that fascinated Valentina. When he approached her and introduced himself in Spanish with a charming German accent, she felt a spark. They talked about art, design, and architecture. Sebastian told her about his work on an infrastructure project in the mountains outside Bogotá, and Valentina shared her passion for Colombian culture and history. The hours flew by like minutes. At the end of the evening, they exchanged phone numbers, and Sebastian promised to call her. He kept his promise. Just 2 days later, he got in touch, and they arranged to meet for dinner at a cozy restaurant in the Zona Rosa. The first date was perfect. Sebastian was attentive, funny, and interested in everything Valentina had to say. He asked questions about her family, her dreams, her fears. He listened, really listened, and when he walked her home, he kissed her gently on the cheek and said he would love to see her again. Valentina was on cloud 9 after that evening. In the weeks that followed, they saw each other regularly. Sebastian took her to German cultural events in Bogotá, and she showed him hidden gems of the city that only locals knew about. They visited museums, went dancing, and spent long afternoons in cafes, talking about everything and nothing. Sebastian told her about his childhood in a small town in Baden-Württemberg, about his parents, who were both teachers, and about his desire to see the world and do something meaningful. Valentina told him about her own family, a typical middle-class Colombian family from Bogotá. Her father was a lawyer, her mother a teacher. She had 2 younger siblings with whom she was very close. Family meant everything to her. After 3 months, Sebastian made a suggestion that would change Valentina's life. He had to return to Germany for 6 months to work on a project in Stuttgart. He asked if she wanted to come with him. Valentina was torn. She loved her job, her family, her life in Bogotá. But she also loved Sebastian, and the idea of seeing Europe was tempting. After long discussions with her family and friends, she decided to take the risk. She quit her job, packed her bags, and flew to Germany with Sebastian. The first few weeks in Stuttgart were challenging. Valentina didn't speak German, and although many people spoke English, she often felt isolated. The weather was grey and cold, so different from the warm sun of Colombia. She missed her family, her friends, the vibrant colours and sounds of her homeland. But Sebastian was her rock. He came home every evening, cooked with her, showed her the city, and introduced her to his friends. Slowly, Valentina began to settle in. She found a part-time job as a freelance designer and started learning German. After 4 months in Germany, Sebastian proposed to her. It was a Sunday afternoon in the castle park, the autumn sun casting golden shadows on the paths. Sebastian got down on one knee, took a ring out of his pocket, and asked her in Spanish if she would be his wife. Valentina was overwhelmed. Tears ran down her cheeks as she said yes. They returned to Colombia to plan the wedding. Valentina wanted to get married in her homeland, surrounded by her family and friends. Sebastian agreed. They chose Cartagena, the most romantic city in Colombia, a place that stood for love and new beginnings. The preparations were exciting and stressful at the same time. Valentina's mother, Claudia, took over the coordination. She rented a beautiful colonial hacienda on the outskirts of Cartagena, organized caterers, floral decorations, and music. Valentina designed her own invitations, of course. She wanted every detail to be perfect. Sebastian invited his parents and a few close friends from Germany. It was to be an intimate ceremony, about 50 guests, a mixture of Colombian warmth and German precision. The wedding day was radiantly beautiful. The sky above Cartagena was cloudless, and a gentle breeze from the sea brought relief from the heat. The hacienda was bathed in warm colors. Garlands of flowers hung everywhere, and the scent of jasmine and roses filled the air. Valentina wore a cream-colored dress with lace details that accentuated her slender figure. Her dark hair was pinned up in an elegant bun, strewn with small white flowers. She looked like a princess from another time. Sebastian stood at the altar in a tailored dark blue suit. As Valentina walked down the aisle, accompanied by her father, he couldn't hold back the tears. At that moment, everything seemed perfect. The ceremony was moving. A Catholic priest performed the wedding, a tradition that was important to Valentina's family. They exchanged vows they had written themselves. Valentina promised to love Sebastian in good times and bad, to support him and to give him a family. Sebastian promised to protect her, honor her, and give her a life full of happiness. When they kissed, the crowd burst into applause. The reception that followed was a celebration of cultures. The Colombian guests brought music and dance, and the German guests marveled at their zest for life and energy. There was eating, drinking, and laughter. Valentina's sister gave an emotional speech in which she talked about the siblings' childhood and how happy she was to see Valentina so in love. Sebastian's best friend Matthias, who had traveled from Munich, told funny anecdotes about Sebastian's student days and how he had always dreamed of finding true love. As night fell, Valentina and Sebastian danced their first dance as a married couple under a sky full of stars. The band played a gentle bolero, and the guests formed a circle around the young couple. Valentina leaned her head on Sebastian's shoulder and whispered to him that this was the happiest day of her life. He kissed her forehead and replied that their life together had only just begun. But while Valentina felt pure happiness at that moment, she had no idea that the first cracks in her perfect world were already appearing that evening. Around midnight, Valentina noticed that Sebastian was checking his cell phone several times. It was inconspicuous, almost casual, but she noticed it. Every time a message arrived, his face contorted for a fraction of a second before he smiled again. Valentina didn't mention it to him. It was their wedding night, and she didn't want to spoil the mood. Maybe they were business messages, maybe congratulations from friends who couldn't make it. She pushed the thoughts aside and concentrated on the celebration. The guests stayed until the early hours of the morning. When the last visitors had finally left, Valentina and Sebastian retired to their suite. The wedding suite was on the top floor of the hacienda with a large balcony overlooking the Caribbean garden. The room was lit with candles, and fresh rose petals lay on the bed. Valentina was exhausted, but happy. She lay down in Sebastian's arms, and for a moment the world was perfect. But the next morning, reality began to show its ugly face. Valentina woke up early while Sebastian was still fast asleep. She got up, went out onto the balcony, and breathed in the fresh morning air. The sun was just rising over the sea, and the city was slowly coming to life. She felt peaceful, fulfilled. As she went back into the room to get a glass of water, her gaze fell on Sebastian's cell phone, which was lying on the nightstand. It was vibrating quietly. A message had arrived. Valentina didn't want to be intrusive, but something inside her urged her to check it. Maybe it was intuition, maybe just curiosity. She picked up the phone and unlocked it. Sebastian had given her his passcode once when he asked her to write a message for him while he was driving. She didn't think anything of it. What she saw made her heart stop. A message from an unknown number. The text was in German, and although Valentina wasn't fluent, she understood enough to grasp the content. "I miss you so much. When are you finally coming back to me? This situation is destroying me." Valentina's hands began to shake. She scrolled through the messages, and with every line she read, another layer of her reality collapsed. These weren't just friendly messages. They were intimate messages, full of longing, love, and despair. And they weren't from yesterday. They went back weeks, months, to the time when Sebastian and Valentina were already engaged. Valentina dropped the phone as if she had burned herself. She couldn't breathe. Her chest felt like it was being squeezed. She staggered to the bathroom, closed the door behind her, and sank to the cold tile floor. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't make a sound. She didn't want Sebastian to wake up. Not now, not like this. She had to think, to understand what was going on. How could this be? They had just gotten married. They had exchanged vows. He had looked her in the eyes and sworn eternal fidelity. And all this time, there was someone else, someone who was waiting for him, hoping for his return. Valentina stayed in the bathroom for almost an hour. She tried to calm down, to think clearly. Should she confront him? Should she pretend she hadn't seen anything? Should she call her mother, her sister? But what would she say? That her marriage was already over the day after the wedding, that she had married a man who cheated on her. The shame was almost as overwhelming as the pain. Finally, she got up, washed her face with cold water, and looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at her was no longer the radiant bride of yesterday. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face pale. But at that moment, she made a decision. She would not remain silent. She would demand answers. She had a right to know the truth. When she came out of the bathroom, Sebastian was awake. He was sitting in bed, his cell phone in his hand, his face tense. He knew she had seen it. The look she gave him said it all. He opened his mouth to say something, but Valentina raised her hand. "No," she said, in a voice she barely recognized. She was calm, but icy. "Don't say anything now. I want you to explain exactly what this means, and I want the truth, every single word." Sebastian swallowed. He put his cell phone aside and rubbed his face. There was silence for a long moment. Then he began to speak, and with every word he said, Valentina's world crumbled a little more. There was indeed another woman. Her name was Lena. She lived in Stuttgart. She and Sebastian had been together before he went to Colombia. The relationship had never really ended. When Sebastian met Valentina, he had told Lena it was over, but then he started writing to her again. Lena was desperate, clinging to him, and Sebastian, weak and torn, let her. Even when he brought Valentina to Germany, he secretly saw Lena. When he proposed to Valentina, Lena insisted that she couldn't live without him. Valentina listened, motionless, while Sebastian continued talking. He tried to justify himself, to explain that he didn't know what to do, that he didn't want to hurt Lena, but that he loved Valentina. He said the wedding was an attempt to draw a line under the past and make a fresh start. But Lena wouldn't let go. She continued to write to him, even threatening to harm herself if he didn't take her back. When Sebastian finished, Valentina was no longer the woman who had married him. Something inside her had broken, but at the same time, something else had formed. A cold determination. A rage that seethed deep inside her. She got up, went to the closet, and began packing her things. Sebastian jumped out of bed and tried to stop her, but she pushed him away. "Valentina, please, let's talk about this. We can work this out," he pleaded. She turned to him, and the look in her eyes made him freeze. "There's nothing to work out, Sebastian. You destroyed our marriage before it even began. I'm not going to stay here and watch you switch back and forth between me and her." But Sebastian didn't give up. He followed her across the room, talking to her, trying to take her hand. "I love you, Valentina. I want to be with you. Lena means nothing to me anymore. I'll cut off all contact with her. Please give me a chance." Valentina paused. Part of her wanted to believe him, wanted everything to be okay again. But a larger part knew it was too late. The trust was broken, and without trust there could be no marriage. She looked at him for a long time, then said quietly, "If you really love me, prove it. Show me that Lena no longer plays a role in your life. Call her now and tell her it's over for good." Sebastian hesitated. It was precisely this hesitation that told Valentina everything she needed to know. He couldn't do it, or he didn't want to. She turned away and left the room. Valentina left the hacienda without looking back. Her hands trembled as she took her cell phone out of her pocket and called a taxi. She couldn't show up at her family's house, not now. She needed time to think, to understand what should happen next. The taxi took her to a small hotel in the old town of Cartagena, far away from the hacienda, far away from Sebastian. She checked in, went to her room, and collapsed onto the bed. Only now, in the silence of the empty room, did everything come pouring out of her. She cried until there were no more tears left. Hours passed. Her cell phone rang incessantly. Sebastian, her mother, her sister. She ignored all the calls. In the afternoon, she sent her mother a short message. "I'm fine. I just need some time to myself. Please don't worry." Her mother replied immediately, "What happened, my darling? Sebastian is desperate. He's looking everywhere for you." Valentina didn't reply. She turned off her phone and stared at the ceiling. How could she explain to her family what had happened? That the man she had just married had a mistress in Germany? That her marriage was a lie? On the evening of the second day after the wedding, Valentina decided to find answers. She turned her phone back on and went through Sebastian's messages. She found Lena's full name in an older conversation, Lena Kaufmann. With trembling fingers, Valentina opened Facebook and searched for her. It didn't take long to find the profile. Lena was young, maybe 26, with long blonde hair and blue eyes. In her photos, she beamed at the camera, often with friends, sometimes alone. Valentina scrolled through the pictures, and her heart clenched when she found a photo of Lena and Sebastian. It was from a year ago. They were standing by a lake, Sebastian's arm around Lena's shoulders, both smiling happily. The caption read, "My happiness." Valentina closed the app and took a deep breath. She had to talk to this woman. She had to know what was really going on between her and Sebastian. With trembling hands, she wrote Lena a message on Facebook. "Hello, Lena. My name is Valentina. I am Sebastian's wife. We need to talk." She pressed send before she could change her mind. Then she waited. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, a reply appeared. "His wife? That's impossible. Sebastian loves me. Whoever you are, you're lying." Valentina felt anger boiling up inside her. She sent a photo from the wedding. Lena in her white dress, Sebastian in his suit, both smiling in front of the altar. This isn't a photo from the past. It was taken 3 days ago. The reply came faster this time. That can't be. He told me he was in Colombia on business. He promised me he'd come back. Valentina wrote back, he lied to both of us. But I want to know the truth. How long has this been going on? What followed was an exchange that confirmed Valentina's worst fears. Lena and Sebastian had been together for 3 years. When he went to Colombia, they had argued, and he had said the relationship was over. But after a few weeks, he started writing to her again. He said he had made a mistake, that he missed her. Lena forgave him. When Sebastian brought Valentina to Germany, he secretly met with Lena. He told her that Valentina was just a colleague, a friend, nothing serious. Valentina read every line, and with each message her despair grew. She wrote, "And now? What do you want to do?" Lena replied, "I don't know. I love him. But if he married you, then he also cheated on me." The two women, thousands of miles apart, connected by the same man, began an unusual conversation. Valentina learned details that broke her heart. Lena told her about intimate moments, about promises Sebastian had made to her, about plans for a future together. Valentina shared her own story, the wedding, the dreams, the lies, and slowly in this exchange, a plan took shape. On the 3rd day after the wedding, Valentina returned to the hacienda. Sebastian was relieved to see her. He hugged her, but she remained stiff in his arms. "We need to talk," she said in a firm voice. They sat down on the terrace, and Valentina put her cell phone on the table. "I spoke to Lena," she said calmly. Sebastian's face turned pale as a ghost. "Valentina, "Shut up," she interrupted him. "I don't want to hear any more of your lies. I know the truth now, the whole truth." She told him what Lena had revealed to her, and Sebastian broke down. He confessed everything, the affair, the lies, the double promises. Valentina stood up and looked down at him. "You've destroyed both of us, but there will be consequences." Sebastian looked up at her, tears in his eyes. "What are you going to do?" Valentina smiled coldly. "You'll find out soon enough." Valentina spent the night at the hacienda, but not in the same room as Sebastian. She slept in one of the guest rooms, the door locked. Her head was full of thoughts, plans forming in her mind. She knew she couldn't just carry on as if nothing had happened. The humiliation, the betrayal, the shattered dreams, all of this demanded a response. But what? The next morning she made a decision that would change her life forever. She booked a flight to Stuttgart. If Sebastian didn't have the courage to tell Lena the truth, she would do it herself. She would confront this woman in person and show her what Sebastian had done. Maybe it was anger, maybe despair, maybe just a desperate attempt to regain control of a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. She didn't tell Sebastian about her plans. She packed her bags, called a taxi, and drove to the airport. Only when she was already sitting at the gate did she send him a message. "I'm flying to Germany. I have to finish this myself." Sebastian called her immediately, but she didn't answer. He sent her desperate messages. "Valentina, please don't do this. It will only make things worse. Let's talk about it." But Valentina had talked enough. She switched her phone to airplane mode and boarded the plane. The flight from Cartagena via Bogotá to Frankfurt took almost 14 hours. Valentina hardly slept. She stared out the window into the darkness and thought about everything that had happened in the last few days. How could her life have fallen apart so quickly? A week ago, she had been the happiest woman in the world, surrounded by family and friends, full of hope for the future. And now? Now she was sitting alone on a plane on her way to a foreign country to meet her husband's lover. When she landed in Frankfurt, she took the train to Stuttgart. The city was familiar to her from the time she had spent here with Sebastian, but now it felt different, cold, strange, threatening. She checked into a small hotel near the main train station and sent Lena a message. I'm in Stuttgart. We should meet. The reply came within minutes. Where and when? They agreed to meet the next day at a cafe in the city centre. Valentina spent the night sleepless, rehearsing in her mind what she would say, how she would behave. She wanted to be strong, composed, but deep down she felt only pain and confusion. The next day, Valentina entered the cafe 10 minutes early. She ordered a coffee and sat down at a table by the window. Her hands trembled as she raised the cup to her mouth. Then she saw her. Lena entered the cafe, and Valentina recognized her immediately from the photos. She was taller than Valentina had expected, slim, with a face that was pretty despite the tension. Her eyes scanned the room until they met Valentina's. For a moment, they just stood there and looked at each other. Two women, connected by the same man, by the same lie. Lena slowly walked over to the table and sat down. "So, you're Valentina," she said in German. Valentina understood enough to nod. "And you're Lena." They spoke in English at first, a neutral language for both of them. The conversation was tense at first, each woman cautious, suspicious. But slowly they began to open up. Lena told her story. She had met Sebastian at university. They had been together for 3 years. He was her first great love. When he said he had to go to Colombia, she was devastated, but she trusted him. And then he started writing to her again, and she believed he would come back. Valentina told her own story. The encounter in Bogotá, the whirlwind romance, the wedding. With each story, it became clearer how systematically Sebastian had manipulated both women. He had given Lena hope while swearing eternal fidelity to Valentina. He had promised both of them the same thing, lied to both of them. The anger Valentina had felt began to change. It was no longer directed at Lena but at Sebastian. This woman was just as much a victim as she was. "What do we do now?" Lena finally asked. Valentina looked her in the eyes. "I don't know, but I want him to understand what he's done. I want him to feel the consequences." Lena nodded slowly. "Me too. He destroyed us both." The two women decided to confront Sebastian together. Valentina called him and told him where she was. Sebastian was shocked. "You're in Stuttgart, with Lena." "Come here," said Valentina. "We need to settle this once and for all." Sebastian arrived an hour later. When he entered the cafe and saw the two women sitting together, his face turned ashen. He sat down, head bowed, and waited. Valentina began to speak, calmly but firmly. She laid bare all the lies, every betrayal. Lena added to her story, showing messages and evidence. Sebastian didn't try to defend himself. He knew he had lost. At the end, Valentina stood up. "Our marriage is over, Sebastian. I'm filing for divorce." She left the cafe, Lena following her. Outside, the two women embraced, two strangers connected by pain. After the confrontation in the cafe, Valentina and Lena went their separate ways. Each went her own way, but both carried the same pain with them. Valentina returned to her hotel, exhausted from the emotional turmoil of the last few days. She lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The encounter had brought her no relief, only a deep emptiness. She had thought the confrontation would help her find closure, but instead she felt more lost than ever. The next day, she received a call from her mother. "Valentina, my darling, where are you? Your father and I are very worried." Valentina sighed. She had kept her family in the dark, unable to explain what had happened. Now she had to do it. "Mom, I'm in Germany. Sebastian and our marriage is over." There was a long pause. "What? But you just got married. What happened?" Valentina told her everything. The news, Lena, the lies. Her mother was shocked, then angry. "That man cheated on you. You have to come home immediately. We'll take care of everything." But Valentina didn't want to go home yet. She had to find clarity for herself first. She told her mother she would be back in a few days and hung up. She spent the next few days wandering around Stuttgart, aimlessly, lost in her thoughts. She went to places she had visited with Sebastian, and every memory was like a knife stab. The cafe where they had had coffee together for the first time, the park where he had read her poems in Spanish. It had all been a lie. On the fourth day after her arrival in Stuttgart, she received a message from Lena. "Can we meet again? I need to talk to you." Valentina hesitated, but finally agreed. They met again in the same cafe. Lena looked shaken, her eyes red from crying. "I spoke to Sebastian," Lena began. "He came to my house and begged for forgiveness. He says he wants to stay with me, that you were just a mistake." Valentina felt anger rising inside her. A mistake. She was his wife. "And what did you say to him?" Valentina asked in a strained voice. Lena looked away. "I told him I need time to think. But honestly, Valentina, part of me wants to believe him. I've loved him for 3 years. I can't just throw it all away." Valentina couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Lena, he lied to both of us. How can you still trust him?" Lena began to cry. "I know it's stupid, but I'm not as strong as you. I can't just carry on as if nothing happened." Valentina felt her hands clench into fists. She had thought Lena was an ally, someone who understood what Sebastian had done. But now she saw that Lena was willing to take him back, despite everything. "If you take him back," Valentina said slowly, "then you're just as guilty as he is. You know what he did, and you're allowing it to happen." Lena looked at her with tear-stained eyes. "That's not fair. You don't understand how complicated this is." "Yes, I do," Valentina replied. "I understand that you're weak, and he'll take advantage of that, just like he always has." The two women parted ways in an argument. Valentina left the cafe feeling that everything was out of control. She returned to her hotel and decided to fly back to Colombia the next day. There was nothing more she could do here. But that night, something happened that changed everything. Valentina received a message from an unknown number. It was a photo of Sebastian and Lena taken through a window. They were lying together in bed, in a tender embrace. Underneath it was written, "He has already forgotten you." Valentina stared at the picture, her heart racing. Who had sent it? And why? She wrote back, "Who are you?" The answer came immediately. "Someone who wants you to know the truth. Sebastian and Lena are back together. He used you for the German passport. Now that you're married, he can deport you and continue with her." Valentina felt something break inside her. The last remnants of hope, of faith in humanity, dissolved. She got up, put on her jacket, and left the hotel. She knew where Lena lived. Sebastian had shown her once. She took a taxi and drove through the dark streets of Stuttgart. When she arrived at the apartment building, she saw light in Lena's apartment on the 3rd floor. She went up, her heart pounding loudly in her chest. She rang the doorbell. Lena opened the door, wearing a dressing gown, her hair tousled. Behind her in the living room, Valentina saw Sebastian sitting on the sofa. "Valentina," Lena said, shocked. "What are you doing here?" Valentina pushed past her into the apartment. Sebastian jumped up, his face pale. "Valentina, it's not what you think." "Shut up!" Valentina shouted. Her voice echoed through the apartment. "I know exactly what this is. You've both been fooling me." The situation quickly escalated. Words turned into screams, screams into tears. The apartment was filled with tension. The air seemed to vibrate. Valentina stood in the middle of the living room, her eyes sparkling with anger and pain. Sebastian tried to approach her, his hands raised in a conciliatory gesture. "Valentina, please, let's talk this through. This is a misunderstanding." Valentina laughed bitterly. "A misunderstanding? I see you here in her apartment in the middle of the night. What's there to misunderstand?" Lena stood at the door, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale. "Valentina, He came to me. I didn't call him. He said he needed to talk to me. And you let him in, Valentina said coldly. Of course you did, because you're just as weak as he is. Sebastian stepped between the two women. Stop it, both of you. This isn't getting us anywhere. Valentina, I know I've made mistakes, but I want to make things right. Give me a chance. Valentina looked at him for a long time. She saw no remorse in his eyes, no real insight. She only saw a man trying to regain control of a situation that had slipped away from him. You have no idea what you've done, do you? She said quietly. You destroyed my life, my dreams, my future. And all for what? For a German passport? For an adventure in Colombia? Sebastian shook his head. No, it wasn't like that. I loved you, Valentina. I still love you. Lies, Valentina whispered. All lies. She turned and walked toward the door. Lena stepped aside to let her pass, but before Valentina could leave, Sebastian grabbed her arm. Don't let me go like this. We need to sort this out. Valentina pulled away, her voice sharp. There's nothing left to sort out. We're done, Sebastian. You and me, it's over. She left the apartment and ran down the stairs, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, she heard Sebastian's voice calling after her, but she didn't look back. Valentina spent the next hour wandering aimlessly through the streets. The city was quiet, with few people still out and about. She felt like she was trapped in a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. Eventually, she found herself on a bench in a small park. She sat down and tried to collect her thoughts. What should she do now? Return to Colombia and face her family? Stay here in Germany and try to build a new life? Everything seemed impossible to her. Her cell phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. You saw them together. Do you believe me now? He will never respect you. He will always go back to her. Valentina wrote back, Who are you? Why are you doing this? The answer came immediately. I am someone who knows Sebastian. He broke my heart too. I want him to pay for what he did to all of us. Valentina stared at the message. Were there more women? How many lives had Sebastian destroyed? She got up and made her way back to the hotel. On the way, she decided she'd had enough. She would return to Colombia, file for divorce, and try to rebuild her life. Sebastian could do whatever he wanted with Lena. It was no longer her problem. But when she entered her hotel room, she found a message on her bed. Someone must have put it there while she was away. It was an envelope with her name on it. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten in German. She used her cell phone to translate it. Dear Valentina, you don't know me, but I know you. I've watched how Sebastian has treated you, and I'm sorry. But you should know that it's worse than you think. Sebastian hasn't just cheated on you and Lena. There are others, many others. He's a predator who uses women and then discards them. I was one of them. I want to help you find justice. If you're ready to learn the truth, meet me tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the castle garden. I'll be waiting for you by the big oak tree. A friend. Valentina read the letter 3 times. Her mind told her that it could be dangerous to meet a stranger, but her heart longed for answers, for the whole truth. She decided to go. The next morning she went to the castle gardens. It was a cool day. The sky was grey and heavy. She found the big oak tree and waited. After 10 minutes, a woman appeared. She was about 40 years old, elegantly dressed with short dark hair. She smiled sadly when she saw Valentina. You came. I'm glad. Valentina nodded. Who are you? My name is Karin, and I have a story to tell you that will change your life. Karin led Valentina to a bench at the edge of the park, far away from prying eyes. The two women sat down, and for a moment there was silence. Then Karin began to speak. I met Sebastian 5 years ago. I was newly divorced at the time, vulnerable. He was charming, attentive, exactly what I needed. We were together for almost a year until I found out that he was seeing 2 other women at the same time. When I confronted him, he just disappeared from my life. No goodbye, no explanation. He blocked my number and I never saw him again. Valentina listened, her stomach clenching. Why are you telling me this now? Karin looked at her seriously. Because I wasn't the only one. I did some research, talked to other women. Sebastian has a pattern. He seeks out women in vulnerable situations, gives them what they need, and then takes advantage of them. Some for money, some for residence permits, some just because he can. Valentina's hands trembled. How many? At least 7 that I know of, maybe more. The world around Valentina began to blur. She had thought she was special to Sebastian, that their love was real, despite everything. But now she learned that she was just another woman in a long line of victims. What should I do? She whispered. Karin put a hand on her shoulder. You have to decide that for yourself. But if you want justice, if you want to prevent him from hurting more women, then you have to act. How? Valentina asked. Karin hesitated. There are ways, legal ways, but they take a long time and often have no consequences. Or... She left the sentence unfinished. Valentina looked at her. Or what? Karin shook her head. Forget it. That was a bad idea. But the seed had been planted. Dark thoughts began to grow in Valentina's head. Thoughts that frightened her, but at the same time offered a strange satisfaction. She said goodbye to Karin and returned to the hotel, her head full of confused ideas. In the evening, she received a message from Sebastian. Valentina, we need to talk. Please, I want to explain everything. Come to Lena's apartment tomorrow. We'll both be there. We can work this out together. Valentina stared at the message. Both there, Sebastian and Lena. The 2 people who had destroyed her life, together in one apartment. A cold calm came over her. She wrote back, All right, I'll be there tomorrow at 8 in the evening. She spent the night sleepless. Thoughts swirled through her head, scenarios played out. She knew she was at a turning point, a point of no return. The next day, she walked through the city, bought a few things. A long knife in a kitchen store. She told the saleswoman she needed it for cooking. No one asked any questions. When evening came, Valentina dressed quietly. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Her eyes were empty, her face expressionless. She put the knife in her bag and left the hotel. The drive to Lena's apartment was like being in a trance. When she arrived, she took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. Lena opened the door, smiling, almost relieved. Valentina, I'm glad you came. Come in. Sebastian stood in the living room, nervous but hopeful. Valentina, thank you for being here. I know this has all been difficult, but we can find a way. Valentina nodded slowly. Yes, find a way. She sat down on the sofa, her bag beside her. Sebastian and Lena sat down opposite her. We've been thinking, Lena began. Maybe the 3 of us can come to an agreement. A civilized divorce, no hard feelings. Valentina looked back and forth between the 2 of them. Civilized, she repeated quietly. Then, in one fluid motion, she reached into her bag. What happened in the next few seconds would go down in the annals of German criminal history forever. 2 lives ended in that apartment, and a 3rd would never be the same again. Hours later, the police found Valentina sitting between the bodies, the bloody knife still in her hand. She didn't cry or scream, she just sat there, empty, as if her soul had long since departed. When she was arrested, she said only one sentence. He left me no choice. The trial that followed became one of the most talked-about cases in Germany. Public opinion was divided. Some saw Valentina as a victim who had been cornered. Others saw her as a cold-blooded murderer. But everyone agreed. This tragedy could have been prevented if only one of the parties involved had been honest. Valentina was sentenced to 15 years in prison. She's serving her sentence quietly, without complaint. Her family in Colombia visits her regularly, and her mother always says the same thing. My girl wasn't like that. Love destroyed her.